let's just get straight into it, Michael. Maybe you should tell us about your character, John Cooper, and what you admire about him especially.
Well, John Cooper, to start, for people who don't know the show, John Cooper is a field training officer, an FTO, and it's my job to train the new recruits when they come out of the academy for what they're going to actually experience when they're out on the streets. The idea is that everything that they learn in the academy is sort of, by the book, and it really doesn't apply to what is really happening on the streets, which is sort of true and sort of not true. It's more of a Zen idea of everything you learned is going to stick with you. Don't think about the books anymore. Your training is going to stick if you do it, but now it's time to apply it in the real world, and it's my job to sort of make that transition for these guys coming out and the women coming out of the academy into real-life experience, taking what they've learned in the academy and actually applying it to the streets. John himself actually is a pretty severe character. He takes his job very seriously, and he basically feels that if you can't make it through him, you're never going to survive on the street. So he's very, very hard on the recruits and takes the job very seriously. On top of all this, he has a lot of stuff going on underneath. He has a really sort of dynamic, if you will, history with his home life. There are very strong reasons why he became a cop. He really wanted to make a difference, in a world where he felt there was no justice. He wanted to make sure that people were heard and that justice was served. On top of all this, he's pretty far in his career. He's 20-year veteran, so the job's taking a toll on him physically. He has a bad back that he's dealing with on a continual basis. He's on medication for that. The problem is that he's sort of gone beyond what the department and what the doctors have said is sort of okay for him to be on. They know that he takes it when he takes pills and he's on drugs, or he's drugged. He's on pharmaceutical drugs when he has flare-ups with his back, but no one is aware that he is actually continually and constantly in pain, and therefore constantly on drugs, which he thinks he has a handle on, but ultimately we realize through the series that he doesn't really have as good a handle on it as he thinks he does. And this situation actually starts to snowball as the series progresses, and you realize he's not only putting himself in danger, he's putting people around him in danger, and that stands exactly for sort of against everything that he truly believes in and believes what the job should be. Other than that, John's just a prince.
Working on a law enforcement show, especially one as realistic as this one, as you're going through your daily life or you're traveling around the country, what do law enforcement people have to say to you about the show and about your character?
Well, what we've been getting mostly, and I always preface this because I think you have to always leave room for the other side. 100% of the people who've approached me or have reached out to me on either the websites or text or letters, 100% of the people that I've been in contact with have been massively supportive of the show and think that it is one of the best representations of what it is actually like to be on the job as a law enforcement officer. I have to assume there's people out there who don't care for it, who are not contacting me directly to tell me that. So I always have to leave room for that voice. And I'm not going to sit here and say, we were doing the most amazing show and we're representing law enforcement like it's never been done. But the truth is we to an extent are. And that is one of the main things about the show is that we take it very seriously to represent the specific technical aspects of law enforcement. We try to represent as closely as possible as to the way that they are done within the Los Angeles Police Department. We have a technical advisor who is on set with us all the time. When we are on set, we have either current serving or retired law enforcement always on set telling us what the situations are. We have permission from the writers when things are written. If the physical characteristics of what is written does not fit what procedure is, we can change those things on the fly, on set, without checking with anyone, as long as they are proper to procedure. So we put a lot of emphasis on doing it correctly, so far as the procedures that the law enforcement officers would use. That being said, we are still a TV show. We're a 1-hour drama, and everything will be contained within that. So to tell the story, sometimes things are changed, which will be not necessarily a more dramatic effect, but which would tell the story more appropriately within the confines of capturing it on film. So sometimes distances are changed. Sometimes there'll be less or more officers than would actually be in a situation, because sometimes you want something to be very intimate, but the reality of it is that wouldn't be an intimate situation. There'd be a lot of people crawling around, but for purposes of storytelling, to focus the audience, we'll have maybe that room cleared and just 1 or 2 officers there. So the law enforcement community has been really supportive. The current chief of Los Angeles Police Department is very supportive of the show. But what also we've been getting from the officers is the fact that they're flawed. And everyone, if you look around, everybody you meet is flawed to a certain degree. I mean, dear God, let's hope we're not perfect. The thing is, we deal in a very realistic way what those flaws would do to you if you were on the job. Now, once again, we're a 1-hour TV show, so we probably have a highly flawed group that would not maybe necessarily be together or be weeded out. But, the stakes are much higher if you have those kinds of things going on in your life. That being said, there are real life consequences for those things that we go through, the mistakes that we make, and the choices that we make, just like there are, in any department of any large city. And those sort of procedures that take place and the things that happen to those officers that do those things mirror what we try to deal with in the show.
Yeah. Michael, I think for me personally, watching the show, the characters are really well drawn out. They're not caricatures. They seem like real people, which is what draws the viewer in, to actually care about these people. And in particular, your character, the fact that he's gay, or the fact that he has, issues with pharmaceutical drugs, or the fact that, he might be a bit gruff and bitter about, his life, or, about his childhood tragedy, is really just one of many facets of the guy, just like, for Regina King's character and other actors on the show. That must be really, really gratifying for an actor to play that kind of role instead of playing the caricature police officer where you have a certain parameter within which to play your particular person.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no... At times, I would say we all shift and take the different archetypal, roles in the show. But John Cooper is a really good cop. He's not Superman. So as many things as he may do aggressively or be the first guy to jump in, he may get his ass handed to him. It's like he'll make mistakes and he will screw up, and he will succeed, and he will sometimes be funny, and he will sometimes be tragic, and everyone, I think, really has their opportunity to step up to the plate to sort of show these aspects of humanity. Most people who are a certain way in public are very different in private, and I think the show does a really great job of showing all the sides of these very complex lives, with these people doing this amazingly horrific job.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, we're an awards website, so every subject we ever do eventually turns towards that. If the Emmys were to nominate you in July, every performer has to choose an episode from the current season to submit to the judging panel. Is there one episode where you felt like you gave your best performance here in 2011, or had the meatiest material, or a lot of screen time, a good combination of all of that? What would you choose if that were to happen for you?
I'm actually, they've come to me and asked me that about 2 weeks ago to start thinking about that. That's going to be hard for me to choose, because I look at our show. Our show is very much an ensemble show, and it does not work unless everybody steps up to the plate and knocks it out of the park. So there are episodes that I feel, my particular performance, I feel really confident about my performance, but that might not be the best episode as a whole. And then there are other episodes that are fully realized where everyone's, doing that, but might minimalize, my performance in it. So the interesting thing is that, and I'm learning this as we go through this process, is that although the Emmy in this case is given or looked at for your performance in the series, so far as when we're talking about it, but when they're looking at for an actual nomination, they're looking at one specific episode, which is not the series as a whole. And I think one of the amazingly wonderful things about our show is that there are all these sort of seeds that are planted throughout the season that, that grow to fruition, and these sort of stories that snowball as they go and, come to this culmination at different points, not necessarily at the very end of the show. But I would say that there's a few episodes that I'm down to. One is called The Winds, where I deal with my father and talk at his probation hearing. There's another episode, episode 8, where we deal with a lost child, and John is dealing with a lot of internal struggles with his coming to terms with his painkiller addiction and his back issues, and the possibility of not being able to be on the job anymore. But then the finale, which I think is probably one of the best hours of television that I've ever seen, regardless of the fact that I'm part of it. I think that everyone, all of these storylines come to a culmination in my relationship with my trainee, where there's sort of this shift in, the teacher becomes the student becomes the teacher. And it's very, very satisfying if you're someone who follows the show and has followed the show since the beginning. So I'm going to have to look hard at that. For me, it really is. I just have really high hopes for the show to sort of make a dent this year in some sort of level in any of the categories, so that the show really gets on the map and people really realize that the show is out there. Because even though we're pulling, around 3 million audience a week, that's not a lot of people. And for us, I think our biggest goal is to get as many people watching the show as possible. And I think that everything benefits from it. And more importantly, we just continue to, we get to continue to make more of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with Southland, most of the media had really focused on, the transition from NBC to TNT and the resurgence in the actual, third season with respect to the writing and directing. And you mentioned the finale. That I agree. That's probably one of the most brilliantly directed episodes of TV that I've seen in a long
Chris
time.
Beachum is incredibly phenomenal, just amazing.
Absolutely,
director.
The DP, everybody was on their A game that episode, and it was just so impressive. And with respect to your performance, I mean, Michael, I think you have a range of episodes to choose from, and even the second to last episode, Valley Drill, that was also really quite impressive for your character. Yeah. But I was wondering, given that all these actors are amazingly impressive, when I'm talking about even the guest actors and all the supporting cast, what are they like to work with, especially Ben McKenzie? Given that you and he seem to have such an amazing connection, you really do play off each other so brilliantly. I mean, what's it like working with him and the others? And are you all, obviously pretty close knit?
Yeah. First off, I love working with Ben. This has been the most comfortable I've ever felt in a situation. And yes, because most of our stuff is together and we spend so much time together. I said this before, but it bears repeating. I feel safe when I am working with him, and he's the same with me. And when actors feel safe, they are open to be as creative as possible, and you are open to new situations. And my chair drops down as I'm talking. Sorry.
We're live, people.
Okay. No, it's just it's been a phenomenal situation for all of us. Starting with with Ben from the screen test that we did together. There was concern early on with NBC that Ben and I looked too much like brothers, so they actually had us come into a chemistry test and work together with each other, with the heads of the network there, and they hired us in the room, which is pretty rare. Usually everyone goes goes home and everyone talks about it and this and that. But they saw early on that there was a connection between the two of us.